When serial killers are found to have children, it tends to make us question, what will those kids grow up to do? Does murder run in the family? But what if two killers are from the same parents? How common are killer siblings? It's even more disturbing to question if twins grow in the womb together and then grow up together, and one decides to later walk down a dark path, will the other follow? In this case, that's exactly what happened. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, and today's case is a sort of recent one. One of the cases is very recent. The other is a few years older, but they are very much intertwined because the killers are twin sisters who pretty much did the exact same crime. This case is really diving into the psychology of not only twins, but killers and their families, nature versus nurture. And it's just an all-around baffling case that you would have never expected. However, we will find out that people around them should have expected this, and some even did. Before we get into that, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever wondered how reliable forensic science is? How much science is actually involved? Well, I get to introduce you to a brand new documentary called CSI on Trial. And it's about that very thing. In order to watch this documentary, it is actually on the Curiosity Stream website, and they have so many other documentaries as well. It's the perfect place to find sort of nonfiction documentaries about crime, about science, history, technology, and so much more. And it's exactly for those who want to know more. They have so many exclusive films that you cannot watch anywhere else. They're adding new shows every week, but CSI on Trial is actually a 6-part series putting forensic science to the test and exposing flaws in common CSI methods used in real-life criminal cases. You dive into the stories of the wrongfully convicted who have been freed and those who are still behind bars. But you can stream it online, on your TV, as well as on your mobile phone. It's already one of the most affordable streaming platforms, but if you want 25% off, you can go to curiositystream.com/Brooke and use the promo code Brooke, or you can use the QR code on the screen and scan that. I can't wait to keep watching, and I know that you will love it too. So now let's get back to the story. So it was 2021 in Texas, and 23-year-old Shamaya Hall lived with her 7-year-old daughter named Madison Petrie, and they lived on Fraser Street in Dallas. Now, on June 17th of 2021, a neighbor would run to their home after hearing screaming coming from inside. He began to grab shirts and towels to stop the bleeding. Shay would eventually be booked into the Dallas County Jail, charged with capital murder and aggravated assault. Now, the arrest warrant affidavit would be released, and it would reveal that Shay's mother had actually been questioned because she was at the home at the time of the crime, and she said that that afternoon around 2 p.m. she was in the bath when she began to hear screaming as well. And so she got out to assess the scene, and that is when her son, who was also home, came to her and said that Shay had just stabbed his friend. This was a 16-year-old who was just there to hang out with Shay's brother. Now, together, this mother and brother of Shay would try to get the knife away from her. They would be wrestling her, but they were unfortunately unsuccessful. Shay was then said to go after her 7-year-old daughter with this knife, and Madison was attacked by her own mother and stabbed 30 times. The neighbor who showed up to help was actually a Dallas County Sheriff deputy who lived nearby, and so while he was coming in to help and to make sure that he was doing everything that he could, other neighbors were also noticing what was happening, and they were calling 911. However, one man was saying that he was trying to call and they wouldn't answer, and this is actually something that happens a lot in their area. It's an ongoing issue that he was speaking up about because they feel like they're not being heard in emergency situations. Nobody's answering the phone, and there is an alleged shortage of dispatchers in Dallas with only 25 operators at that time. Now, the 16-year-old victim was rushed to the hospital, but Madison was in a much worse condition. And so the sheriff deputy found her lying on the floor and actually saw that she was covered in blood and that her mother, Shay, was just standing over her, staring at her, and not saying a word. Now, the sheriff deputy would detain Shay and tackle her to the ground, and he claimed that he had seen her with blood all over her hands. He knew that she had done this, and that is when he grabbed Madison, wrapped her up, put her in his car, and ended up driving her to the nearest fire station because he was worried that the hospital was too far away, that it would be too late for her. Now, unfortunately, it was still too late for Madison, and she would pass away from her injuries. She was pronounced dead at the hospital, and she was described as a very smart little girl. Now, this 16-year-old victim would survive the injuries on his shoulder and his lower back where he had been stabbed, and Shay's mother actually had cuts on her hands where she tried to get the knife away from Shay, so she was getting help on her injuries as well. When Shay herself was questioned while in custody, she would confess to the stabbings. However, she first identified herself as another woman named Shamaya Hall. It turned out this was her twin sister, but everyone thought that Shamaya was the one who had done this until getting further clarification that this was Shay. Now, Shay also claimed that her daughter was being sexually assaulted and kind of alluded that this was the motive in the case, but investigators were unable to confirm nor deny this or how it connected to the murder. Now, this is all she would say before declining to speak further, but neighbors of Shay would say that she had recently come home from a stay at a psychiatric facility and she had not been home long. She did also have a criminal record that she was currently on probation for at the time because she had a 2017 charge of aggravated assault and burglary of a habitation. But for the murder, Shay was given a $1.5 million bail. But Shay would actually be found mentally unfit to stand trial, and so she was transferred to a psychiatric facility so they could further watch her and get her the help she needed. This is where she's currently believed to be to this day, but the family members who had been there that day in the house to witness this murder were obviously devastated. Though 2 years later, they would be going through the exact same incident. They were reliving the entire thing in quite an eerie way. You see, Shay had a twin sister, like I told you, the one that she tried to identify herself as, Shamaya Hall. And these two had been born in 1997, but in 2023, Shamaya Hall would be booked in jail for murder as well. She was 25 years old at the time, living in Forney, Texas, and she had 5 children. However, she did not have custody of them at the time. You see, they were under the care of CPS, or the foster care system in Texas, due to a drug investigation of their mother. Now, CPS would place them with a relative of the Halls who lived in Italy, Texas, and they were actually suspecting around this time that Shamaya was getting to have unsupervised visits due to this being a relative who would allow her inside of the home, and this was actually not allowed. You see, having a relative take the children is called kinship care, which is when abused or neglected children are taken from birth parents but not given to the foster care system. It's an alternative to that, where if there is a relative willing to take them in, they are able to do so. And, if not, then they will go to a licensed foster parent who they most likely do not know. But in this case, the children's great-grandmother had taken them in for Shamaya. Now, Shamaya had 5 children who were a 6-year-old boy, 5-year-old twins who were a boy and a girl, a 4-year-old boy, and a 13-month-old girl. Now, the older students were attending the Stafford Elementary School, which was right across the street from their great-grandma. But on March 3rd of 2023, a CPS social worker would call 911 for help around 4 p.m. The social worker had arrived at this home of this great-grandmother who had that temporary custody of the children, and this was an unannounced visit, which can happen with social workers when they fear that something wrong is happening inside of the home. They wanted to catch Shamaya being there with the children even though she wasn't allowed to, and so the social worker found that their suspicions were true because Shamaya was home with all of the children and the great-grandmother wasn't even there. Now, as the social worker decided that she was going to take away the children, Shamaya locked herself in the home with them, and the CPS worker called 911 not knowing that Shamaya was inside, stabbing them all. The social worker would tell the operator that the mother had threatened suicide in the past and was currently being aggressive.
This is what dispatchers relayed to first responders.
She is there for removal of the kids. The last time she was at this address, the mother was aggressive, and she is being combative today.
She took all the kids inside, and then she came back out with what was believed to be blood on her hands. By the time that help arrived, all 5 children had serious stab wounds.
I got kids multiple stab wounds back bedroom.
And after being rushed to the hospital, 3 of those children would be pronounced dead. And the 3 who passed away were actually the oldest. Their names were revealed after they passed away. So this was 6-year-old Legend and the 5-year-old twins, Aliyah and Aiden. And they were all stabbed in the stomach. Now the 4-year-old boy and the 13-month-old girl would survive. Like I said, she had to be life flighted to the local hospital where they had to seriously heal some critical injuries. And their names have yet to be released.
A relative who babysat the kids spoke with us tonight, saying she remembers holding the children like it was just yesterday.
And I just want everybody to know them are some beautiful angels. And I love them. And I just want to say they gained their wings.
Now, the 6-year-old boy and the 5-year-old twins were said to have different fathers. And so the father of the 6-year-old boy named Legend was actually 26-year-old DeAndre Dorsey, who said that he had been in prison the last 4 years for manslaughter of a 44-year-old man named Jesse Jermaine Richardson, which happened in 2019. Allegedly, what had happened at this gas station, this convenience store, was that Jesse and his wife had pulled up to buy cigarettes, and DeAndre started a fight with them. He was getting himself ready, he was taking off his jewelry, and he was arguing with him, and then he followed him outside to an alley where Jesse's wife tried to get them to stop and to separate, but when DeAndre hit Jesse so hard he fell unconscious to the ground, she ran away. Jesse was deceased at this time. DeAndre would tell police that he was an experienced boxer and that the victim wouldn't have been able to win a fight with him, though he picked one anyway. And the CCTV footage caught DeAndre stretching and getting ready for this fight, even though Jesse didn't seem to want this fight to begin with. And Jesse nor his wife ever struck DeAndre. They never had a chance to. He was killed after DeAndre hit him one time. Now, once Jesse was confirmed to be deceased, DeAndre was charged with manslaughter. But now that he was out of prison, DeAndre was telling the media after the murder of his son that he knew it was bound to happen. In fact, he had warned CPS and everyone around him plenty of times. He said while he was locked up, his mother and stepfather actually tried to get custody of Legend during the time, and he was going to relinquish his rights to them so they could adopt Legend. However, they were able to see Legend 4 months prior to his death, and then after that were pretty much cut off from the meetings, and they had undergone, home studies, which is when the social workers come into your home and make sure it's a fit place for children. They had done everything right, but then they suddenly were just cut off. DeAndre said that they probably didn't get this opportunity because of his background, and because of that, they played with the future of his son. Now, his mother and stepfather, who had been working with CPS during this time, were told by CPS that they didn't want to separate the children, so they kept them all in the care of Shamaya's great-grandmother.
I mean, it's like a horror movie. He had this smile like it would light up the whole room. He was such a beautiful baby. He was such a beautiful baby. It's like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do nothing. I wanted to fight. I don't know. It just anger. You couldn't have been that selfish. You should have stopped and said, "What am I doing? It's wrong." You just kept going and going and going and going and going and going while those kids are screaming and hollering for their life. She didn't curl. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna keep fighting, and I'm gonna fight harder. And I'm not gonna rest. I'm not gonna rest. I'm not gonna leave this world until we get justice for Legend.
And for those of you who are not familiar with CPS or the foster system, this is actually something that is commonly done with sibling groups. They are kept together under this guise that it will help them heal, help them bond more, it will be better for them. And while that can be true, it can also bring on the threat of a trauma bond between the siblings that causes more issues than anything. Some siblings, due to this trauma bond, will end up despising each other. They will hate each other, they will hurt each other due to the memories of what they had been through together prior. It's something that can stop siblings from being able to heal. Sometimes this can also lead to siblings teaming up and harming the family that they are in at that time, or getting in trouble together. Though an even more prevalent problem is the kinship care that often leads to the family members who have the custody of them at that time giving the birth parents the ability to see them, having full access to them, even though the point was to take them away from the birth parents to keep them safe. But CPS was said to get involved in this family starting in June of 2020, which was 3 years prior to this. You see, one of Shamaya's sons, it's believed to be Legend, the oldest, made a statement to a neighbor. He had allegedly walked to this nearby home and told him that his mother, Shamaya, was dead. So, of course, investigators were called, they rushed to the home, and they found that Shamaya was passed out on the floor and unresponsive. She was, though, believed to be on drugs and intoxicated and not deceased. And when she did come to, she was delusional, she was disoriented, she was rambling, but she wasn't answering any questions, and she didn't know where she was or what year it was or anything about her children and where they were. The house is also said to be filthy. There were dirty diapers everywhere, and as she was taken to the hospital, all of her children were taken into protective custody by Child and Family Services. CPS claimed that she was endangering the physical and emotional well-being of the children. But during the many reports over those 3 years of this family, CPS court filings had many warnings about Shamaya Hall. It clearly stated that the children were in danger of multiple serious bodily injury or possible death due to their mother's drinking problems, as well as unmedicated mental health issues, that she would constantly drink herself to the point of passing out, and her children were left unattended to do whatever they wished for hours at a time, placing them at risk. Now, Shamaya's grandma, their great-grandmother, the guardian of the children, she would tell CPS that she also feared for Shamaya's kids after they had witnessed her twin sister murdering her children. But a year prior to Shamaya murdering 3 of her kids and injuring the other 2, it was found that CPS had filed a petition to schedule a hearing in order to terminate parental rights of Shamaya, meaning she could never get her children back. This was due to her continually asking to see the kids every single day, even though she was told she needed to have limited contact. But this termination didn't go through in time. In fact, the hearing was scheduled for July 2023, which was 4 months too late. Legend's father, DeAndre, told the media that his son's death was really hard for him and his family, and that he was staying strong for his mother, who was having a really hard time with the whole situation. She was the one who wanted to adopt him and wasn't given the opportunity to.
I wish I was there to save Legend. I really do. I think about what could I have done different. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't have did anything.
But DeAndre said that he never got to hold his son outside of a CPS facility, and now he's dressing for his funeral. DeAndre's stepfather said that CPS would not give them to him when he was alive, but they were now going to get him when he was no longer here. They said that they were going to receive a lifeless body instead of a beautiful soul. He went on to describe Legend as joyful, a good kid, and a beautiful person. Shamaya Hall would be booked in the William McCollum Detention Center and charged with 3 counts of capital murder. Her bond was set at $6 million, and with a search warrant, investigators went inside her home, or her grandmother's home, and where the murders occurred. They found a knife blade in the front bedroom with blood on it, as well as a large stainless steel knife in the back bedroom with blood as well. A neighbor told the media that she had just seen the children walking to school, and one of the younger kids was actually holding the older kid's hands, and she thought it was cute that their mother had taught them to support each other and to watch out for their younger siblings. Yet later that day, that mother would stab them all. Nearly 70 people attended a vigil outside of the home in order to honor the children, and they released balloons and asked the media to stay on the other side of the road to give them some peace, which they thankfully did.
I'm hurting. This has hurt me because when you hear of something like this happening, yes, it does. It grieves your heart. I'm here as a family support because our family needs support. We need the praying strength of the community because it could happen to any family. It just happened to happen to our family.
Now, the nearby schools asked students to wear gold and black to show support for the family and the community. They also offered counseling for these students when they did return to school. The Eternal Rest Funeral Home took care of the funerals of the 3 children, and Shamaya was then charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for the surviving children. But it turned out the 2017 charge that we talked about with Shay, that also involved her twin sister, Shamaya. You see, together in 2017, they had gone to Shay's ex-boyfriend, and on May 23rd, Shay would text her ex saying that she was going to attack him, and that's exactly what they did. Shortly after, the twins headed over to his apartment. He opened the door, saw it was them, tried to slam it, but Shay actually got a hold of his shirt and pulled him out, and Shamaya then sprayed him with pepper spray. The ex then ran inside to wash his face, and while he did so, he came out to see the twins in his house, and Shay was pulling out a knife from her bra, and Shamaya was telling her to run up on him or attack him, and the twins would actually be forced out of the house because one of the ex's friends showed up to help defend him. They had both been charged with using a lethal weapon during an aggravated attack, and Shamaya actually got a plea deal where she was given a lesser assault charge. Shay was named an accomplice, and this was 4 years before Shay killed her daughter, and 6 years before Shamaya would kill 3 of her children. Now, this case has been compared to a very recent one that we have discussed, Lindsey Clancy case. The woman believed to kill her 3 children while being under postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis. Though that case is still ongoing and has varying opinions, it is theorized that all of these cases we talked about, both of these twin sisters and Lindsey, were motivated by underlying mental illness. It's unknown if Shamaya was suffering from any sort of postpartum illness, but her youngest was only 13 months old. Some claim, though, that Shamaya is not being treated the same as Clancy is, even though they both happened recently, due to Shamaya being a black woman, that she's not getting the same sympathy as Lindsey has been given due to this occurring possibly because of mental illness. And while it's very true that racism still very much exists, unfortunately, in this world, and black women are often treated much, much differently, there is no doubt about that horrible fact. But when we're talking about these cases, do you believe that these 2 women's cases should be compared and treated the same? I think we may have to wait and see if Shamaya is diagnosed with anything involving mental illness, if she too is found mentally unfit to stand trial as Shay was.
I'm committed to this family, and I'm concerned about this family. This is something that's unbelievable and unexplainable, and this is the end result of a mental instability that's gone awry. Something happened mentally, and that's where we are. We're trying to wrap our minds around it. Regardless of what it looks like, those children were really loved. That's the message.
As far as in a criminal court, we know at least one part of these cases will be treated differently because there is no death penalty in Massachusetts when Lindsey Clancy murdered her children, but there is in Texas where Shamaya did. Now, as shocking as it seems that twin sisters would turn into killers and do the exact same thing, it's actually something that has happened many times before, including identical twins Stephen and Robert Spaleski in New York. They too were very close twins, and at 16, Stephen would hit a grocery store owner over the head with a hammer and killed him. He had also stabbed him to make sure he was dead. Stephen would be caught for this, and he would say that this man was making unwanted sexual advances. This man's name is Ronald Ripley. And while being questioned, Stephen said, "If I kill someone, I kill them for a reason." Now, he was convicted of manslaughter and ended up only serving 8 years and released because he was a minor at the time. His twin brother Robert would wait until they were 35 to commit his first murder. This was of a sex worker named Moraine Armstrong, who was strangled with electrical cords. He was questioned in the murder because he already had a criminal record for drugs, but he wasn't charged with that. And a year later, he would murder Adrienne Berger, who was his girlfriend at the time. She was already decomposed by the time anybody found her, and so they could not deem her cause of death to be any sort of murder. Again, he got away with it. And then, for his next murder, he took inspiration for the murder that happened many years prior by his brother. And he would use a hammer to kill a man named Charles Grande. Again, he was never caught. So how do we know about these crimes? Well, it would be 14 years later before anyone would know that he was a serial killer. You see, in 2005, he would strangle and kill his own friend named Vivian Aranzi while on crack. Now, he was believed to be under this delusion that she was possessed by a demon, and when he detoxed, he turned himself in and admitted to the 3 prior murders. He was sentenced to 100 years and deemed a serial killer. Now, it was believed that Stephen only killed once, and he was released for that murder, but he had been back in jail many times for different things throughout his life. But when he heard about what his brother had done, he said, "I thought I was the only murderer in the family. I don't know what made him do that." They were said to never kill together, but they were twins who killed separately. They were often imprisoned together, even though it wasn't for the same things throughout their lives. Stephen was actually not the main suspect in the murder when he was 16 years old. After the owner was killed, the police suspected Robert because he already had a criminal record and was on parole. But then Stephen confessed, so they arrested him. They then believed that Robert had been there, but they couldn't prove it. And according to true crime writer named Benson, Robert would write to them saying that he started killing as a teenager, that he took his father's favorite pig that they had and put a gun to its head and blew its brains out.
He cheated on my mother, and then they ended up getting divorced. So I took it out of my father's pig and shot him in the head. My father came home and he says, "Well, why'd you kill the pig?" I said, "Well, you said if we kill something to eat it, so I ate it. We're eating it." He sent me to a psychiatrist, but it was basically, I was just pissed off because he was messing around behind my mother's back. And my first homicide schizophrenia thing when I was puberty was thinking about killing my mother and burying her on our property before I was 10 years old. That's how disturbing.
But you loved your mother.
Absolutely.
But you thought about killing your mom.
Absolutely, and burying her on our property. I wasn't physically able to do that. And as a child, I was thinking, if I kill my mommy, who's going to take care of us kids? We're not evil at all. I mean, you can consider killing somebody evil, I guess, but innerly, I'm not evil. I am not. Or my twin. My twin and I are similar in a lot of ways.
Well, you're identical twins,
absolutely,
right? Do you think it was competition? Well, he did it, now I have to do it?
Part. In some, yes, sir. Some of it had to do it in part with competition. We never meant to really hurt anybody. I'm not wired to kill people.
So I really found it strange that these 2 cases really parallel, with these twins both being killers but never killing together and not having really a conversation, or didn't seem that they had a conversation about becoming killers or doing this. It was just something that was in them. But these are not the only killer twins. There have been many throughout history, and they just really make you wonder how much nature or genetics plays a role in this, or if it is some sort of twin connection or a bond that puts them on the same dark path. So what do you think? Was it inevitable that Shamaya was going to do the same thing that her sister did 2 years prior? So let me know, have you ever seen a case where one twin becomes a killer and the other is a good person? I believe that I have seen cases like that before. I don't think that it's all the time that both twins become killers. I think it's easier to see twins becoming a criminal partnership and killing together or having crimes done together, but it's even more baffling when they do it separately. Do you think maybe the second twin decided, in both of these cases of Robert and Stephen and of Shamaya and Troy Shay, do you think after the first twin killed and the other twin knew about it, the other twin then decided? Or was it something that was going to occur anyway? And don't forget to check out Curiosity Stream for the CSI on Trial documentary. Don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay,